Hello America on countries A through Z, and hyper additionally, people A through Z. Everything is about hyper additional nature. The science is individually grouped in together, including the law. They have had others told to them. Because before latter semi ancient nations, and before modern nations, already entrenched, were roles with uses of names A through Z as systems tactical ulterior individually grouped in together from the one that we are individual group difference slash S in species volume 4. Where functional, it is being distinct volume science, the identity of the hyper simultaneous, simultaneously being in a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. That identity of reason why and how fish have eyes look just almost like humanity's. Birds, insects, the species volumes have distinctly, non distinctly, and have simultaneously, but further hyper simultaneously, a shared identity of value slash value progression that is not their own themselves, but it is anyway. While it is not, where and how it is discernible, this identity of this distinct identity of hyper simultaneous nature. This breaching method used all location slash S consciously as a breaching method from semi ancient times that forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded humanity's names to have to counter itself as if with fact treating nature means. For the same reason, nature showed Ulysses S. Grant to communicate that there was no time in history when words could not be made and kept more valuable than war. I'm paraphrasing. Nature's identity uses value functionally to show us how its identity of volume is the only one that completely makes more of its own volume through as its identity relation to itself. And the value of that is a trinity, distinctly where it is not juxtaposed with matter or capable of being juxtaposed with matter. Distinctly from where and how it is part of itself is juxtaposed with matter. And part of it is not by any way. Where and how more and more forever nature, 3 volumes of forever nature are being made. And with the existence of itself as value before this, as its identity of relationship to itself, and as the extent we could discern this simultaneously. Every subject has individual grouped in together. Even if you make something up, has this hyper volume science inseparable from all the smallest finite detail group details and simultaneous ones, black pupils. So our founders, James Madison and, and George Washington, communicated for us to communicate other about their agreement. James Madison as the face of our founders. George Washington as the face of our presidents with him, though. And we're supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, therefore, of the torture methods and of the fact treatment nature slavery method slash S against everyone. That forced roles was since before they were born. Not only had it designed the suburbs tactically denatured. If you'll know real quick, suburbs throughout the world. Everyone mows the grass and takes the grass away. Suits and ties, counters. These suburbs were designed before cars, before our founders were born. There are less worms, and we're not feeding the soil. Everything is connected, and it demonstrates and communicates, not with words, but with positive value nature progressions or negative value nature progressions. 3 ways at once, 1/3/5. It is 3 ways grouped, and exceptions in exception nature that appear to be a demonstration of other are a demonstration of the same thing, where one identity, its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that scientifically, beginning with the discernment of it, takes discernment of how it is distinct scientific, one of the things it is distinctly from. In other words, the fish didn't invent why they have 2 eyes, and all the other species do. Humanity didn't invent this. There is an identity, its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that being demonstrated. English was revealed to teach this with the other languages, functional to itself, because we are being led by the hyper invisible but still discernible. We're being led by what it is showing us, where nature shows us. There is individual volume science, a grouped one, and the species volume, hyper invisible but still discernible, and or invisible but still discernible. And it comes with the other ones, the other species bodies. See, but we don't have this appreciated because abridged sciences and roles with them are the result, are manifest where and how this breaching method knew at countries A through Z. This breaching method had already sustained roles with slavery north and south. That is not clear to Americans because other has been communicated for James Madison and for George Washington, because of what they said to us is distinct from what they communicated to us. And that's because a breaching method was measuring and maintaining every group, individual, and together. Syntactical collusions with itself relative to where and to how it was watching, even without all those collusions realizing. Nature was demonstrating and is demonstrating, for example, the scientific, more than just the scientific value of a breaching method. A human fact treating nature breaching method is one of the things that slavery was about constantly. And the value of understanding that is only increasingly valued. A predicate acts with facts delivery system method that the courts would deny, lawyers would deny, overt criminal enterprises would deny, private ones, and the insidiousness of logic of people A through Z. And then increasingly at all locations /S, where there are instances, descriptions. See, now computers, they use scripts. People say, oh, that's not legit. Oh, it's legit. There are proofs that when people become police forms or court forms and they learn readings of statutes and the language of statutes and justification, they say it can't be legitimate. And, they just comes out, it's legit. And see why that is legitimate. You guys left out what we're capable of discerning from the youngest ages. Nature itself shows us, individually grouped in together. Native Americans had sickly distinctly against them what the colonists themselves didn't want. with the kingdoms over there didn't want, and queendoms, and all exceptions and exception nature, they and or the people would value to pretend other because of the relativity of the hypernative as being one of the things that is distinct about this identity, its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that. Where there is discernment of capable of being, how breaching method assigned black and white to mean other, because it knew that nature communicates with how we have black pupils and whites of eyes. And the roles with slavery, the English were enslaved, this were enslaved. This is to make people not remember their history, which no one wants, of their languages. Then it made them knowledge of good and evil, made them experts on it. And from America to England, experts on English, the language of English, the nature of debate about it, and or the nature of debate regarding quality factual nature as hyper-criminal insidiousness, as hyper-criminally foreign influence at countries A through Z. And that was sustained right where and how everyone needs to react to it more and more, or not. Right where and how more and more all voicings for humanity, individually, all groupings of humanity, then they're going to speak for humanity. In other words, peace. There's a difference between peace and hyper peace. Nature shows us the difference between a truth, for example, that could be used for a lie, that could be used to screen lies or motivations. Because one of the things we're going to observe with Little Rap Guy and friends is how this breaching method increasingly needs other things, others, or selves, blamed for the real causes of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and nature. Like how or why. People from New York City in those big, tall, stacked buildings, people stacked upon. I think it's called Give It To Them. I just saw not long ago, there's a Locks. I believe it's by the Locks or Jeezy. Give It To Them. And look at the size of those buildings in New York City. Before they came, before our founders were born, the suburbs were designed tactically to nature. This breaching method assigned hyper additionally on all natures of employment, therefore job titles, used tactilitarian from how nature has us hyper additionally, its voicings for the ground. It has nature, but we can only discern our extent of nature. And it shows us this. For example, why and how we need more than one name for the word identity. That's why there was more than one name needed for a verb, a predicate, a verbal, a gerund. See, verbals of what a verbal is and why we should appreciate what a verbal is, or why we should appreciate what a gerund is. We're appreciating what a participle nature is. The identity of everything is simultaneously greater than, more finite than, and it is active relativity. Where it is that part of its identity that is its complete identity relationship to itself, and the value of that. Where it is distinct from being your identity. It is not distinct from being your identity. The tip of your nail. But it is distinct from your complete identity. And this is also relative because your complete identity is a semi-nature relationship to that identity. of value/value progression, that identity of forever nature, that is hyper additional nature. Everything is plural, making more of its individual self. /S. So your individual, the tip of your nail is its complete identity on its own, too. But everything works this way. So the subject and the verb, they are, the parts of speech are invisible but still discernible. Why and how they appreciate that we appreciate them as distinct identities of invisible but still discernible is how and why simultaneously we are appreciating the difference between the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. Computers have to mimic this. So we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. Differences. See, the law spoke for differences wrongly. The people on the building stack, people in the suburbs know that colonization and worse is really, it's part of why the suburbs are the way they were and are. Where there is the nature of debate of all things, people from other locations already had interest to keep quality aspects in natures of criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative treatments with that, names or identity treatments. Also self-value, because they are increasingly relative at other locations. See, this breaching method measured and maintained. Nobody allowed free speech, but simultaneously they were supposed to pretend other simultaneously. If you observe what the laws were directing before our founders were born, if you observe what our founders actually communicated to us, with all that they were forced to say, they stuck in other. Therefore, they communicated for us to discern and communicate about the difference between communications and what is said, and or the value of what came first. And nature itself shows us to name that breaching method a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. It also shows not just with the sciences needs to do this. It shows with the religions. It shows also because it's also relative, because this is exception. These are exceptions in exception nature. Being exploited, having been used from how nature communicates. It being as all exceptions in exception nature. And or as the value of what came first. And or as the nature of each question. Because it communicates it by asking, by presenting us with questions. What made slavery? The same thing that measures and maintains other things others are ourselves blamed for it. And hyper additional motivations, nature's needs, interests. To plant, pretend that's it's the only reason. That's my job, and this is how I was trained to treat the subject. So the people inside the big buildings, so the little rap guy and friends, are part of an anti-hyper archetypal criminal enterprise that tried to stay that only. But then it became an anti-hyper archetypal criminal enterprise. And we'll get into this. But in the movie, it's not just that there is a devil or a shaitan. It is also that we're not supposed to call it one name alone, except for how we are. But that is also relative. There are things we learn from the nature of the law being proper. So we know that, or the physics of the law, and they have to be simultaneously valued its way, which is hypernative. We know this hasn't been. So how much could we know about a political candidate, for example? What's important as mandated law is followed. Then even if someone messes up or whatever like that, in other words, nature will show us. But you guys have forbidden nature shows. So the species coach and simply the logistics of, we got different markets. And in other words, your voices individually grouped and together. We're increasingly in like relations. Everywhere they use relations, you guys we're supposed to communicate about how human relations is affected by human fact, human nature, torture, extortion, slavery method, fact, human nature, slavery method, 3 ways manifest. Because nature is demonstrating possession of uses of identities of humanity voicings, names uses that can't defend themselves and afford discern what is capable of being discerned. See, but this is at each age of fact, human nature, sickly distinctly. And so they sense us with proper reason. If you're going to use correlation properly, by why and how. Native Americans really, in other words, no Native American rights. It's not just the reason the rights are needed to be discerned distinctly is because because all different /s are used to play us to hide the foreign name /s. This never stopped with better than complete possession overall identity of intelligence over the difference of their adults and kids. You have to know their names, black pupils. See the suits and ties, counters. So I'm going to show more videos because there's a Ryan Garcia who brought up child abuse with Hollywood and boxing. And this is ongoing. There are courts, judges, and prosecutors, people on off corrections offices, and on the state corrections offices and spots next to it, involved with people with wire crimes of Weatherfield Police today. Switching names, forging names with state police, FBI, state police from Vermont, Rhode Island, the FBI director, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants, other agencies, the difference of who's, in other words, which agency or what like that. That's also part of the clearer than day, part of the identity racketeering, worse than war crimes. So we'll just call it that to begin. Black pupils. So it's no joke. Little Rap Guy and friends have the whole, just like humanity knows, suits and ties, counters, and exceptions are not speaking for what humanity really wants, A through Z. They're valuing all exceptions in exception nature haven't been employed, leaving out exception nature. We had to do business because the first reason we have to do business is the breaching method. while it was and rolls with its self value because nature has it first. But that's gone. That employment system, the validity of it. You won't allow, in other words, this is how they get away with the nature of debate was not debatable. Fake scientists spoke for New York City. Fake scientists spoke for our founding locations. They are founders with James Madison's plan that George Washington agreed to. They had the counterwork store at 13 locations within more than 13 colonies. And so, like the nature of debate contains people using truths for lies. Like if someone has research or not, or what's your research? It's true. Someone could have bad research. That's one thing that could make their argument bad. But you guys are all using bad research. You're using criminally foreign influenced summaries of American history and then pretending research just because it's research means what it doesn't. Nature of debate. See, interstates, the justice systems have rules with a whole bunch of jobs, names, therefore, titles, where they get involved with instances, descriptions, names, descriptions. A, therefore, B, logic. These people, why people get arrested more than once? The intelligence community records, confess, demonstrate, confirm, because they have collusions too, with the differences of the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness still there, and with a logic A through Z, can't defend itself and afford to be, let alone to project anyone's voice making convictions properly. Not even, especially if we're not judges. They're only going to be brought things. No matter, so the difference between that, there are a certain type of victim, that difference, individually grouped and together. When people say government, it's worse too. When people say, people make it like insignificant. How just having black people's right to buy in a picture of New York City in a rap song, you have enough evidence to discern if you know American history properly. The same breaching method that set up the suburbs for the torture, extortion, and slavery, fact-cheating nature slavery of our founders. It was an identity theft, fraud, slander method against them, as it is against the presidents / chiefs today. Anything the presidents say, everyone reacts to. And they're pretending they could speak for practical reason. Use a phrase of Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant didn't have free speech. Rules entertaining things were like slavery entrenched. Could not afford the laws, the voice that is manifest. Where and how the identity the scientists share is manifest. I tell it best some ways. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share an identity, for example, grouped and as an individual. The need to fight, but by the rules. See, but they have stayed abridged. Otherwise, this fight would have, this fact-cheating nature fight would have revealed what I've said: the fact-cheating nature breaching method, a predicate acts with facts delivery system method, self-value, just to pretend they could speak for integrity. So there's another video I'm gonna go where people speaking about what other people say, and all they're doing is to keep the descriptions, not using premises properly. In other words, there are medical locations with a whole bunch of doctors and nurses and the people that work for them, security, their roles with foreign and domestic medical, military, their roles with conflicts with between our countries where none of them had possession of their names. There is maintenance to people who will, okay, you're going to go into Russian American relations because Russian and American relations, obviously, you guys are going to go into China America relations. You guys are going to go, in other words, and then they're going to defend that job and how trained to do it. Increasingly, people are valuing their roles with rights to and needs to lie, or to use truth, to value others using their truth for lie. Self-value, but that being used remotely. The identity of intelligence agencies were shared here and there before our country's founders were even born. So on and off their campuses, they're kept natures and styles and needs to get involved with other people's conversations criminally foreign influence. That's how the intelligence communities leak. Also, an extent of consciousness of their uses of themselves and their family members as pretended motivations in backgrounds, and the difference of that up front because of how this breaching method employed difference /S uses to maintain discernment of its self-value, where people are going to make positive and negative treatments and descriptions of how they feel. Don't forget, this is an identity theft, fraud, slander method /S that set up the suburbs to keep with nature what kept demonstrating what was the involvement of the breaching method, to keep that blame on other things, others yourselves. Keep all exceptions where it is. Like the people doing the shootings in New York City who came from those big apartment buildings, who came from the associated schools, through all kinds of hyper additional things. The differences of that. This breaching method measured and maintained such knew it was going to be there ahead of time, but it already knew till it already had the suits and ties counters would evolve to it and all voicings of humanity. Measure, maintained off the books, uses of the names of the sciences. Therefore, increasingly self-valued roles with uses of the names of the people of the sciences at other locations. Collusion /S with behavior racketeering, where people are acting in that and when they see others. That's one of the things the intelligence community does. Because then if you try to describe how you know someone's name, it makes it look like they had communications with you. The foreign and domestic family members do this. It's one of the, now they don't even really, because where and how they are used remotely, they're being and haven't been used remotely shown collusion /S with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. All sides of campuses too. These are the differences of the names on the campus and the names next to them, and the people and their subjects. The news has Connecticut News has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles of the intelligence communities of different names like FBI, CIA, state police, military police, their family members, someone who talks to them, the differences of that. All that is used remotely, where they're going to speak, a whispered creed. So they have mental health evaluations at hospitals. Many people with Hartford Hospital have roles with the military, have roles with overt criminal enterprises, have roles with their professors and teachers before they became roles with the intelligence community, criminally foreign influence with them. The intelligence community that has been used criminally for an implement. Hope they have rules with a whole bunch of different countries and the difference of that consciously to use those locations criminally for an influence, to use their roles. Think about how they could have the audacity to throw kids in jail for pot in the past in New York City, for example. It knew the breaching method knew that nature is going to keep demonstrating that, so they're trying to cover it up now too, even with the qualities of marijuana. It's like tactically denatured. They're employing people to cover up their readings of statutes that were criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, while they were being used remotely for that. And with the difference of it used even worse as collusion/S. It's also relative to where and how they could get away with pretending not to realize a torture method, singular, hyper singular, but then as another layer of singular slash plural torture methods, extortion methods, in fact, human nature slavery methods to keep the physical one manifest there, clearer than day. Clearer than day. Americans and people across the world, we know the people in the cities. We know where we are in suburbs are tactically denatured. Our founders left us to communicate about that. Our founders left us to communicate about how there was a complete possession over everyone's speech. And you had to pretend other too, or you'd be censored by the breaching method. That already had countries groupings too this way. All psychopaths pretending others simultaneously. So it's really easy to pretend not to understand someone. On a mass scale, that's what they do. And they see the self-value. But this is not self-value by the government. In fact, they hurt people for it. But they also get help for the phenomena associated with codependence of. And as former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, leading up to a 2006 district court case in Connecticut, and leading up to other there were Hartford courts and New Britain courts, and I have roles with them also on off the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before the attack, short term and long term with the same ones, and people tied to them. They have roles with all sides of criminal and civil cases, increasingly as collusions at crime scenes with names next to body dumping spots, increasingly as ones involved with wire crimes of Wethersfield police, who've also been planting evidences on all sides of everyone's houses. And they make them self-value roles with it, because then people have to use other people's names to explain things. And then they don't want their names used. And then they're, those sense and sensibilities are set up to measure and maintain, because there are a whole bunch of nations, like people from Korea and Pakistan, are involved with people with the name Violet and Khalil and Mayana with Yukon, with foreign and domestic military, and probate court judges' families. More than 3 probate court judges' families have roles of predicate acts with facts with names on and off, conjunctions to Route 3 and to that, like the state judicial branch offices, like Hangdog Lane and Two Rod Highway, where they would run into each other. There are names associated with them involved with this, with identity theft, fraud, slander, and with mayors involved. There's a Mayor Gold, who's recording little kids recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he's involved with various natures of federal evidences, crimes, and natures of identity thefts and fraud, slanders, and behavior racketeering. Also with medical offenders of kids, foreign and domestic, again, from Pakistan, from Korea, from Italy, in other words, the Connecticut State Judicial Branch offices and corrections offices. They have rules of wire crime acts and methods because they have behavior racketeering. This method uses where they use other people's names, then defend that They can't defend like and or the country's name. This will maintain all groupings, all couplings like borders countries. Self-value, the differences of that. Self-value used to measure and maintain self-value rules as systems tactile terror, how we are individual grouped and together. Who's responsible? Only allowed to be nature's logic, styles of logic, only allowed to be heard if they're leaving out the breaching method. Religious interpretations of the religions, tactically unscientific. In other words, so on a mass scale, these are people with medical corruption these are medical campuses. No, these are fire campuses. Fire campuses and medical campuses have ruled wire crime acts and mail crime acts and methods, medicines crimes, under the guise of being about medicine. This is also where we have real health care imposition by a bunch of fakes. Regarding, then they want to debate because they have a degree. A lot of natures of, we're going to have to separate the delusions from the criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality aspects and natures of the people speaking for the law and for the names of the agencies involved. And they should fear God next to the where that little spot BB. It says Boot Black on Harvard with a Homeland Security playing games with Fox Connecticut News and those cops with the name Mendez and Domain. Let's get them with the judges and prosecutors planting evidences and rules of the untimely deaths. A whole bunch of people from Harvard Hospital involved with the Britain courts and Harvard courts personally and professionally planting evidences intercities through time. Has something to do with their roles with all these different countries. So we're going to get them on paper now. I get one name in sequence and fear God to keep describing things. Just stay on the sequence shifts and stay on the predicate acts with facts and these agencies and who's the difference of who's involved is being used to leave out the foreign. I have to go, you have to give me one. That's why they're screaming that they're leaving out the foreign names involved at the corner of the streets with these people involved. And the fake motivations. I don't even know all their names. So, and these are on the campuses too, the same ones involved with that. Predicate acts with facts. So Wethersfield campuses, they have teachers, and they have some of those parents and our agencies and courts family members and their kids. They painted themselves in corners, and they've been hiding of live progressions at the same time with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. But this is also through time. They were shown they already had to do that in the past. These are people with the Department of Motor Vehicle, the Department of Transportation, increasingly involved with the spots next to the state capitol, involved criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, fear. And no, I trace from, no, forget that. We'll examine that. Where they speak on acts or speak about what their motivations regarding legislation, regarding guns and stuff. Sandy Hook Promise has roles with people putting evidences to pretend they're against stuff and pretend they're involved with legitimate investigators, but they're criminally foreign influence. The FBI Director Robert Luskin also has rules with lawyers on Wethersfield Police and Robert Chevrolet and names next to them, like associated with the Harry Beecher Stollhouse, Mark Twain House, people involved with the construction of those buildings there, like with the name John Maiano, Maria Vizino, Stephen Stocco. She might be a Maria Stocco. A bunch of people involved with that Wethersfield Pizza, and those, which is one of the conjunctions and adjacent to the state judicial branch offices, and the difference of that is increasingly used too, because these are people increasingly timing where people are going to be, because they need to hide live progressions. People who had roles with untimely deaths when I was a little kid also have roles with it now. And when the principal child abusers campus was brought up to me, and they've been hiding what people caught on the campuses, what I'm doing, which actually recorded on off campuses by putting fake audio and video transcripts too. including kids to fake locations with others. And they've been using the corners of the buildings and the corners of the campuses increasingly. It has something to do with their roles within the intelligence community at Miami and at Orlando, associated with the name Scalora, and people with their roles within Central Connecticut State University. Has roles with some KKK black themed military police, foreign and domestic, Kuwaiti military, involved with our military leading up to the World Trade Center attack in it and since. People who's involved with the name Keen and their neighbors have roles with body dumping spots through time increasingly. And the same ones involved with those different body dumping spots had timed uses of it roles, as roles planting evidences on my street from other areas, with the police switching names and forging names. I caught with the principal child abuser, and with the news planting evidences also with the names next to schools that don't even know me at all. All exception except was part of that thing where they had made people say things when people were coming around the corner. There was no conversation, and then if you try to describe it, they pretend to know you. They hide what came first. Has something to do with the roles of Koreans and spots in Newington associated with the name Daryl Chandler. I don't know who have people but their intelligence families associated with the name Daryl Chandler. He has a wife associated with a food bag and spots in Rocky Hill, involved with them, and Weathersfield, and the differences of town lines. Increasingly, there's a Chet Casper. I don't know his daughter's name. He's involved also with foreign and domestic medical families and people involved with Harvard Hospital. Also brought up the name Casper, with a guy who's switching names and forging names, involved with credible violence threats by people involved with gangs and drugs with their doctors and patients who are forging names and switching names. And they have scams with the lawyers, and they have scams with the students at UConn too, coming in to hide life progressions. These are also intercultural and intracultural fakes that are planting evidences. I had no responses to that Oriental kid too. For example, fake. He's involved with crimes against their own countries. There are proofs that China might be involved with it too, against their own too, with psychiatry. Now, these are people supposed to be experts on reason. They're tactically delusions raw. There are serious weapons in the world now. All they're going to do is just keep degrading humanity and keep blaming the other things others ourselves with nature demonstrates and demonstrated actually. They're going to increasingly value all means to use truths to keep those things blamed the other things others ourselves. These are people involved interstates with the mental health locations, with their families planting evidences also. Jennifer Kenneth Pickett, I never had a conversation. In other words, they're planting evidences. They're trying to make fake exceptions of knowing to me. All exception nature too exploited. These are people with California involved with also Clearer Than Day, where there's a truth about Hollywood corruption. It's only concentrated there because it's also concentrated in fact-cheating nature, where people are blaming other things others themselves, even when correctly they're doing it wrongly, exactly the way the breaching method wants. Otherwise, that body is sensed. Even if that body is a majority of people, even if that body is a majority of countries. That's why, individually grouped together, we have to watch how they were used remotely. Better than free, we fix the tactically denatured ground. And then we don't leave out the exceptions. People want, it's all right, you have to do business and speak about economics. So this makes our suits and ties. The locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influence have been self-valued right where they're victims. And that is used remotely because then they're going to keep blaming other things other themselves. The breaching method influence things. And it's roles with motivations. You don't leave that out. So they're making descriptions of things they have collusions with predicate acts, with facts. Sick crime methods. Playing hear no evil, see no evil with the people who run the phones for the news locations, the people who run their security, people involved with the legal cases, have collusions at the crime scenes increasingly. They're changing and what people actually do when they commit actual crimes, and they're increasingly having to frame completely innocent people. They're increasingly having to self-value collusions with the intelligence community. Tactical delusions raw. So they plant fake evidences and fake motivations along Route 3. Fox News, MSNBC, WFSB, and WTNH has been planting evidences where they have the right to lie, usually where they don't, with names next to them. So watch, every lie, every truth they tell has lies attached to it. There are proofs that they put whole stories fake. Hey, well, some ways too. The whole thing is fake now. Fake Brent's bow. Watch what were which trials about, even if they were all made up. Ask yourself, and you'll learn what about this breaching method that caused slavery, for example. So respond for the agencies too, because they're brought up in confessions to federal crime to confess such things. Also, as statements in the form of statements to pretend I know Kelly Kaczmarek, and see that there's an Eric Jensen and people with a state police, and other intelligence along the Berlin Turnpike have roles of people at Hartford Hospital, and who have roles with, intercampuses. The UConn has roles in trading intelligence people. Middlesex Community College has roles within creating intelligence people that are that their families were used criminally for an influence through time as collusions with all sides in criminal and civil cases, and has roles with the worst uses of their overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and their roles with names associated with border issues and types of police. So Central Connecticut State University is leaking. And they have roles recorded with the names next to them, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved intercities with the people involved with wire crimes of Westfield Police now, and their confessions regarding the name Cololo. Bob Chase says that it's involved with a Phil Cololo. Phil Cololo, after that, is still confirmed this. He's on my street involved with more people involved, intercities, with the intelligence community planting evidences through time, and with their conversations with everyone around them. Whiting Forensics is increasingly involved planting evidences with these people involved with identity thefts and frauds, federal evidences, crimes with them into databases no one's watching. Fear. So we'll end this here. Paul Piffix,